Okay. Da, 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 da. Da, 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 da. Okay, there you go. Half-Life.
Go fuck yourself!
I actually got everything
I'm Gabe Newell, and welcome back to Half-Life 2. It's been a long 20 years since its release. In this anniversary update, we've tried to respond to as many of the community's requests as possible. And while this might not be the absolute #1 request from fans, I often hear how much people would like a commentary mode, so we're excited to finally make that happen. Not only was it a challenge to remember many of the details of Half-Life 2's development, but it's not easy to crack open decades-old computer code and wonder what the hell you were thinking way back then. Along with the dev commentary, we've cleaned up a bunch of old bugs and tried to leave things in better shape than we found them. And at least this time, we had the luxury of knowing how things turned out in the end. To listen to a commentary node, put your crosshair over the floating commentary's
physics objects. It might be hard to remember it now, but back when Half-Life 2 came out, small objects in games, like these bits of trash, were usually static, as in they didn't really move, or if they did, it was in a very simple way. If you were lucky, they might break apart into some sprites if you hit them. One of the goals for this initial train station section was to really make it clear to players that these kinds of things were properly, physically, actually being simulated in Half-Life 2. They could be picked up, dropped, thrown, broken, moved by other forces, you name it.
That's cool.
Here we're starting with just a small thing, showing that trash is being blown by the arrival of the train, or, more specifically, an invisible volume that's triggered by the player leaving the train.
That I elected to establish my administration here in the citadel so thoughtfully provided by our benefactors. I've been proud to call City 17 my home. And so, whether you are here to stay or passing through on your way to parts unknown, welcome to City 17. It's safer.
I cannot take this seriously. Pretty bad there.
Storytelling. Creating a sense of immersion was a core principle in our approach to Half-Life 1's storytelling, and it led us to the self-imposed constraints of never, or at least very rarely, taking control away from the player and of keeping the player's avatar silent. These limitations made storytelling more challenging at times, but we felt it was important to stay with them for Half-Life 2. Our hope was that by maintaining these principles, we'd push ourselves to explore deeper, more interactive characters.
I'm gonna need me some privacy for this.
About that beer I owed you. It's me, Gordon, Barney from Black Mesa. Hey, sorry for the scare. I had to put on a show for the cameras. I've been working undercover with civil protection. I can't take too long or they'll get suspicious.
Okay,
I'm
Barney.
way behind on my beating quota.
Yes, Barney, what is it? I'm in the middle of a critical test.
Sorry, Doc, but look who's here.
Walter
Great
White.
Scott! Gordon Freeman! I expected more warning.
Yeah, you and me both, Doc. He was about to board the express to Nova Prospect.
Well, Barney, what do you intend?
I'm thinking.
Alex is around here somewhere. She would have a better idea how to get him here.
Well, as long as he stays away from checkpoints, we should be okay. Listen, I gotta go, Doc. We're taking enough chances as it is.
Very well. And, Gordon, good to see you.
Okay, Gordon. You're gonna have to make your own way to Dr. Kleiner's lab. Oh, man, that's what I was afraid of. Get in here, Gordon, before you blow my cover. Pile up some stuff.
Blocking tutorials 2. There are 2 failures of note in this tutorial. First, players can break it by tossing all the boxes out the window, which is obviously not great. This leaves them stuck and unable to continue.
Blocking tutorials. At times, we need to be certain the player has learned something, and the standard method, at least in game development, not in life, is to trap them behind a gate of some kind, where the player must demonstrate their knowledge to be able to continue. We try to disguise these gates as something natural, so it doesn't feel like the game has come to a halt. Of course, time, resources, or the environmental context itself can make that tricky. In this case, we needed to teach the players how to move objects, so a simple stacking puzzle seemed like the best solution. We tested more complex designs, but they ended up being less effective at teaching the actual thing we needed the player.
Blocking tutorials 2. There are 2 failures of note in this tutorial. First, players can break it by tossing all the boxes out the window, which is obviously not great. This leaves them stuck and unable to continue, which we consider a game-stopping bug that must be fixed. A clean solution would have been to tweak the window or crate sizes so that the player could fit through but not the crates. The problem was that we really only caught this problem late in development, and making even a simple change like that can have unpredictable game-breaking consequences, and right before launch no less. Also, this issue was purely theoretical. We'd never actually seen players do it. Our playtests of the design space had gone smoothly, with players learning what they needed and moving on. So changing the room's design this late in the game could have disrupted that success in ways that we couldn't foresee, so we opted for a more conservative fix rather than something elegant. If you're curious, try tossing all the boxes out the window and see what happens.
Blocking tutorials 3. The second failure in this tutorial space is a case of misteaching, where we accidentally teach the players something we didn't intend. This can be hard to avoid without extensive playtesting, since the game is always teaching, even when it's not by design. We cover a more extreme example of this later in Train Station. Some cases of misteaching are critical to fix, like if the player learns the wrong way to use a weapon or interact with a common element of the game. But this one was more subtle. While teaching players to move objects, we also taught them to stack physics objects to escape a space. Normally that's fine, except we don't deploy that puzzle later in the game, and teaching something irrelevant just clutters up their mental toolkit and makes it harder to readily keep useful things in mind later on. Worse, stacking objects to escape the play space become a problem later on, something we had to actively prevent in multiple areas. With so many physics-based objects in the game, blocking this behavior without putting ceilings everywhere wasn't really an option. In the end, we hoped players wouldn't overthink this early lesson, and when playtests showed players getting stuck later on, we made sure not to remind them of it.
What just happened? It crashed. Oh, no it didn't.
Pick up that can. Contextualizing tutorials, creating a story scenario in which they happen, lets us do more than just stop the game to teach players something. We get to add narrative value to the moment. Here, teaching the player how to throw objects is combined with a narrative setup that gives them a choice in how to respond. After watching the Metro cops casually abuse citizens, it felt right to put the player in a similar position next. If they had opinions on how the citizens should have reacted, now they get to express them. Playtesting showed most players either complied or refused the request to pick up the can, but some tried to avoid the confrontation entirely. Others would comply initially, then retaliate after feeling humiliated. By keeping the moment relatively constrained, in both terms of player actions and the space itself, we could generally react appropriately to whatever choice they made.
Early in a Half-Life game, one of our goals is to make promises to the player, giving them a sense of what to expect later on. From movies to TV shows and books, all great entertainment does this.
The Citadel. We wanted the player's first view of City 17 to highlight the Citadel and its dominance over the city, representing the Combine's complete and total power over humanity. It also needed to serve as a clear goal. Even at the start, you can see where your journey ends. But despite its massive size, playtesters often missed it. A player's sense of depth and scale can be tricky on a computer monitor. If you've played any games in VR, you'll likely have noticed that scale feels more natural. Anyway, in this case, the Citadel's position above the player didn't help things either, which may be because FPS games train players to focus straight ahead or down at their feet. To improve the chances of players taking in the Citadel, we added birds flying towards the structure. A subtle trick we've found helps guide the player's view.
But inseparable from instinct is its dark twin, superstition.
Ropes. One of the things we noticed in all of the reference images that we gathered for City 17 was that there were cables and wires everywhere, and that they were a large part of the high-frequency detail in view. We loved the look of these older European cities enmeshed in the haphazard web of modern life. We felt like we needed a solution for cables, ropes, and similar elements, and we wanted them to be dynamic. Our level designers were eager to create plug puzzles, and connecting a cord to each plug helped players better understand the mechanics.
Playtesting Anecdote 1. One memorable playtest reminded us that we can never be certain what players are thinking or what lessons they've taken from their experience. This tester, after playing from the start and stuck trying to open a door, spent several minutes going back and forth between the game and the keyboard settings. When we asked what they were looking for, they said they were searching for the inventory controls, thinking they could use an item they'd picked up earlier to unlock the door. While we'd seen them collect and drop several physics objects, they'd misunderstood what was happening. The tester believed that pressing the use key while holding an object moved it into an inventory because the item dropped straight down. We knew it was just gravity, but their assumption wasn't crazy. Some adventure games of that era did slide items into an invisible inventory that way.
Strider. This simple moment is a promise that you'll encounter this enormous thing later in the game. Even an uncomplicated scene such as this really does require a lot of playtesting and iteration because of Half-Life's goal of not taking control away from the player. As you can imagine, it takes a lot of small tweaks to ensure that
early game exploration. Up until this plaza, the player likely hasn't had to think much about their path, as it's been clear and straightforward. But here, we wanted to encourage exploration, which meant making the way forward less obvious, which can produce a feeling of being lost or, worse, confused, as you might expect. These kinds of shifts can be tough, especially early in the game, when the player is still learning the game's guidance cues. Here, it's further complicated by force-fielded
closed captions. During Half-Life 2 development, we were approached by folks interested in accessibility who encouraged us to go beyond the subtitle system we had built for Half-Life 1. They requested a full-featured closed captioning system to capture all game sounds, not just dialogue. This turned out to be a much tougher challenge than expected. Half-Life 2 produced a wide variety of sounds, and categorizing them for captions was crucial. Prioritization was also key. Dialogue needed to stand out, and it had to be clear who was speaking. Ambient sounds, like distant combat, were important for
physics simulation. Even though we began Half-Life 2 with a functional third-party physics simulation, it still took us years of additional work both on the simulation itself and its integration into the game until we felt like we could meet our designers' ambitions. Maintaining a shippable level of quality and performance was something we knew would be a challenge along the way, but the more subtle issue was
Crate Baby. This small baby doll has a long legacy. During the long months of internal testing, some of the team turned it into a challenge, a way to make the 47th playthrough of a game a bit more fun. They'd place the doll inside of a nearby blue crate and see how far they could carry it throughout the game. After Half-Life 2 launched, the community started carrying Crate Baby as well, adding their own stories and rules to the mix. A few years later, while working on Episode 2, this was the inspiration for the Little Rocket Man achievement, where players had to carry a garden gnome dubbed Gnome Chomsky throughout the entire episode.
Chomsky even made a comeback for Left 4 Dead 2 in the Garden Gnome achievement, where players had to carry him through the Dark Carnival campaign. These kind of
Oh no. 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 No.
Materials and shaders. Half-Life 2 came out in the midst of a significant shift in 3D graphics, where the industry moved from text. Materials and shaders. Half-Life 2 came out in the midst of a significant shift in 3D graphics, where the industry moved from textures to materials and shaders. In Half-Life 1, every surface had a texture, essentially an image wrapped onto the polygons of the surface. But by Half-Life 2, just 5 years later, every surface had both a material and a shader. The shader was a lump of code that customized how the surface was rendered. The material defined properties for how the surface behaved physically and how it responded to gameplay features. It also held references to textures and other parameters for the shader to use for rendering.
Cube maps. With the addition of materials and shaders, we needed a solution for reflective surfaces like glass and steel. These surfaces had to know what to reflect, but in 2003 we couldn't do any of that rendering in real time. So we developed the cube map system for pre-computed reflections.
Reference maps. As our characters grew more lifelike,